Yeah, so Colby Covington, Leon Edwards, December 16th, Las Vegas, title fight. You know where my money is. I'm all over the Colby train. Colby appeared on James Lynch's podcast last night, and I'd say I've seen 20 articles written quoting all the stuff that he said. We're going to go through a little bit of it here. We're going to talk a little bit about Bryce Mitchell appearing on the Michael Bisping podcast. I thought it was a very good podcast, extremely interesting. We're going to talk a little bit about Strickland and how there is a turning of the tides for all these fighters. And all of a sudden we have free speech at the forefront of the UFC, and it looks like the infusion of identity politics into this sport has taken a real battering over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I love to see it. So Colby showed up on James Lynch's podcast last night. Very good interview, very interesting. Let's get into a few of the points that he was talking about.
You know, he's a racist. James, could you imagine having the hate in your heart to actually press the send button on a tweet completely racist saying that I only got this because the color of my skin, because it's white privilege? Could you imagine that?
Yeah. No, you'd get canceled, right?
Well, in America, you might get canceled or worse. What would happen in Canada? Isn't there a law now in Canada, James, where it's hate speech and you get locked up in jail for saying racist things like that?
Yeah, there's some crazy stuff now with hate speech. You're definitely right about that. Getting back to the welterweight title picture, though, like, do you see anyone else?
So James interjects there. He doesn't like to lean too much into the political stuff. He sticks really to the MMA stuff. Colby Covington's 100% right in terms of the hate speech. If you said something like Bilal Muhammad said about Colby Covington here in Ireland, you would probably go to prison as well. If you said it in the UK, we know that there's many instances of married women, mothers getting pulled out of their house by the police and sent to prison in front of their kids for not abiding by the whole politically correct system that's been built around us. And if we look here, we see a lot of these stats been blasted all over social media in the last 24 hours since it's been announced that Colby will be fighting for the title, which we all knew would happen. And he actually alludes to himself in the interview. He says that Leon Edwards was stalling. He didn't really want the fight. We all knew that. We saw the likes of Ian Cookchado, Gary saying that he's going to get pieced up by Leon's hands. I don't see it happening. I see it the same way Colby sees it, that he's going to go in there, put the cardio machine to work, out grapple him, maybe outstrike him, and possibly finish him. We'll see how it goes. But we'll see a lot of this copium over here on Twitter from Bilal. Bilal is also on a 10-fight unbeaten streak.
Everybody's out there crying, oh, he's on this streak. No, you're not on a streak when you fight the guy and then it's a no contest. That breaks up a streak. It's
like Colby said there, not really, because in the middle there was a no contest. And if we really want to be fair, how could you add the Gilbert Burns fight into a 10-win streak? The dude had his shoulder blown out in the first round and you danced around for 20 minutes then around him and did absolutely nothing, couldn't finish him. Made it look competitive, even though the guy had his shoulder completely out of action and couldn't move. So that was quite embarrassing. The Sean Brady one, fair play to you. You went in there, you blitzed him. Vicente Luque, I was asleep for the majority of that one. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, you went in there and laid on top of him and crotch sniffed him for the entire match. That was a bore fest. Damian Maia, yawn. Leon Edwards, I remember you crying about an eye poke, something like that. And the other ones are nothing burgers. So that's the 10-win streak that we keep getting blasted with because of Bilal Muhammad. I saw Chael Sonnen talking about Bilal Muhammad this morning, saying that he is the guy, he's the number one contender. When Colby and Leon are done, whoever wins that, it'll be Bilal Muhammad next. I don't agree. I don't think he's going to get that fight. How could you give him that fight? Especially when we know that the UFC are about making money. You can't give this fight to Bilal Muhammad. But look, that's just my opinion. If we jump over to the MMA media news today, we'll see that Colby Covington is front and center of the whole lot of it. And a lot of it is coming out of the interview with James Lynch. So that gets a lot of eyes on that interview. So that's good for James Lynch's channel. Colby Covington considering stealing middleweight strap from effing punk Sean Strickland after Leon Edwards fight. This was a soundbite. He went after Sean Strickland. James Lynch was surprised. He thought that the two of them held the same values. Colby disagreed and he went after him. I think he's just kind of building a fight there. One would assume that these type of fighters and these type of outspoken guys would hold the same opinions. Not necessarily. And not necessarily everyone will agree with these opinions. Even if they are awake, even if they are truthers, even if they are done with listening to the mainstream media and they want to enlighten themselves in terms of the narrative is there to be snapped. Not everyone's going to agree with Colby. I don't agree with Colby on the Donald Trump stuff. Do I think Donald Trump would be a better president than Joe Biden? Obviously. This bottle of water would be a better president than Joe Biden. The dude shits himself, doesn't know where he is half the time, and his policies, especially the foreign policy, is absolutely disgusting. Billions been sent to fund foreign wars whilst people are homeless on the streets in his own country. Good job, pal. And then we jump over to Donald Trump. Would he be better? Obviously, anyone would be better. But do I agree with everything that he says and does? Absolutely not. Look, it is what it is. If you believe in the political dichotomy of left and right, conservative, Democrat, and you actually think that your vote or your opinion changes what happens in your country, you're absolutely crazy. The decisions made by these two men in their 80s are 100% dictated by massive money, massive organizations. Everybody who's in power seems to be bending the knee to specific countries, and that has to be called out. I don't see Colby calling it out. I don't see Sean Strickland calling it out, but that is what it is. You have to take what you're given, and in this case, I'm on Colby's side and Strickland's side. If we're actually talking about Sean Strickland facing Colby Covington in the octagon, who wins that fight? I'm going to lean towards Colby Covington. We'll see what happens with the Leon Edwards fight. I think that's I won't say an easy fight, but I think that's a winnable fight for Colby Covington, and I will absolutely love it. The same way when I covered Colby Covington fighting Jorge Masvidal, and everyone laughed, and they all jumped into the comment section and they were like, hey man, we'll be back here on Monday morning seeing your tears and all this type of stuff. If you go back on my videos of Israel Adesanya from 2 weeks ago, you will see the exact same set of comments from these absolute and utter losers. Sorry to let you know, mate, but your boy is going to get whipped on the weekend, and we'll be back here to gloat. I didn't see any of these guys come back onto my channel, because what happened? Your boy, your Israel, your Izzy, your King of the Ring got whooped all over the place by Sean Strickland. Absolutely beautiful to see. I think that we will have the same scenario when Colby fights Leon Edwards and wins the title. I think there'll be a lot of silence, and it'll be lovely. It'll be beautiful. But I don't see Colby ever going up to fight Sean Strickland. I don't see that ever happening. I know that Strickland fought down at 170, but as you know and I know, this is just PR spin. This is to generate headlines like it did today. Has people talking. You see Sean Strickland and Colby Covington in the same thumbnail, you're going to click that on, especially if they're talking shit towards each other. Is that fight ever going to come to fruition? I doubt it. I absolutely doubt it. Colby's got too much on his plate after he beats Leon Edwards. So I think that there's other fights there that are way more interesting for him. Fights like this here, Colby Covington says no welterweight is deserving of the title shot. I's first title defense against Islam Makhachev. I love that. I love this fight. This is an interesting fight because we are led to believe that Islam Makhachev is this unbeatable, untouchable giant of a human being. And we saw Volkanovski rip into him, go to a split decision. I probably was leaning towards Volk because I wanted him to win that fight. If you're talking about after Leon Edwards, who do you want Colby Covington to fight? This would be a massive fight. This would be a huge fight. It would be the Dagestani style of wrestling versus the American steel style of wrestling. This is the type of thing that would reignite the welterweight division. It has gone kind of stale in the last while, especially with the likes of Islam Makhachev coming up a weight. We know that dude walks around at about 190, 200 pounds. You know, there's a lot of weight bullying issues there. Can he come up? Can he do the same thing up there in welterweight that he does down there at lightweight? It's a very interesting one. And just jumping back to this interview for one quick second, I love Colby's answer here. It's 100% on the nose, authentic, maybe playing up a little bit. Let's have a listen.
What did you think of Ian's Gary's comment? Speaking of people who don't like you, he says the biggest thing that Colby Covington has done is lose to Usman twice. What did you make of those comments?
Whose comments?
Ian Gary. He's like an up and comer in your division.
Yeah, never heard the name before. That.
So a nice little shot at Ian Cockchato, Gary there. Absolutely love it. Nobody knows who you are. You've got stung and buried again there by Colby Chaos Covington. Delicious. Absolutely delicious. In terms of this interview, I thought it was a really good interview. And what this exemplifies is that, for me, the MMA community is being veered in a nice direction now. If we go back 3 or 4 weeks, right, where Israel Adesanya was going to defend his belt against Sean Strickland, we had the narrative play out that the UFC were embarrassed by the outspoken Sean Strickland, by the stuff that he says, by the opinions that he would espouse. And this was across the board. Everyone was kind of sneering and laughing at the idea that the UFC were embarrassed. They had to put handlers on him. Israel Adesanya said that the UFC were so embarrassed that I begged them for this fight and I gave him this chance. And if you're one of these people whose cognitive skills don't fire on all cylinders, then you would believe exactly what the narrative was being spun there. But as it transpires, we're 3 weeks out from that. Israel Adesanya got whooped and is no longer the champion. And all of a sudden, being an outspoken, truthful person seems to be back in vogue. We have massive media surrounding the announcement of Colby Covington getting a welterweight shot against Leon Edwards. This interview is blasting out there on the numbers. People want to hear what he's saying. They are intrigued by what he's saying. We have Sean Strickland, whose star has grown and grown and grown since he won the title. Like, this dude cannot do anything wrong. We were all supposed to be embarrassed about him 3 weeks ago. Now all of a sudden, for me, And for the majority of fans out there, if you just look across the board, and even the commentators are starting to bend their will a little bit in terms of actually liking him. This guy doesn't want to make money from signing autographs and selling shit to his fans. He's going to hold a live event and get people there, and he's going to sign everything for them. It is all about the fans. It's all about being genuine and telling the truth. And across the board, this seems to be exploding now in the UFC. We saw the Michael Bisping and Anthony Smith podcast last night with Bryce Mitchell. This was one of the best things that I've watched. Holy smokes, this was a great interview. Not only was it enlightening on so many different levels from Bryce Mitchell, but I have to give credit to Michael Bisping. Yes, he was a little bit of a normie on a lot of the subjects, but he actually embraced this interview. He took it on board and had some good fun with it. As for Anthony Smith, I said it maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. This dude is growing on me the more and more I listen to him. During this conversation last night, not only was he intrigued by what Bryce was saying, he understood a lot of what was being said and actually believed a lot of what was being said. And you can tell that in the background, and I've actually covered a video recently with Anthony Smith and Michael Bisping calling out a certain pharmaceutical company that we're not allowed to talk about. That, coupled with listening to him week after week, he has grown on me so much. I'm actually gaining some serious respect for Anthony Smith. As I said, he was receptive to the ideas that were being put out here. Bryce Mitchell is a legend. For me, when we talk about Colby Covington, we talk about Sean Strickland, we talk about Dricus du Plessis, these are all like my favorite guys. These are the guys that I like to watch. These are the guys that I like to listen to. But Bryce Mitchell is the guy that I listen to and I'm like, yeah. You know, he doesn't want to talk about $100,000 cars or watches or being famous. He wants to talk about farming. He wants to talk about raw milk, which I'm a massive proponent for here. It was illegal in Ireland until recently, and now it's not illegal anymore to drink unpasteurized tainted milk. So now we get the real raw stuff. My whole family drinks it. I could never go back. In terms of organic food and staying as off-grid as you can within an urban area, I'm a massive proponent for that. And when I see what Bryce Mitchell is doing out in Arkansas, building his own house, running his own farm, living off the land, and the only thing that he wants out of all this media and all this attention and all the pain and torture that he's got to go through within the octagon is to live on his farm with his animals and his wife and have God. That's it. And if that's not the type of fighter that you want to back, I don't know what is. And it's beyond encouraging that this week we have the likes of Bryce Mitchell, Colby Covington and Sean Strickland at the front of everybody's thoughts, at the top of every headline. These are the guys that we want to be listening to. These are the guys that we want to be putting our support behind, and I absolutely love it. And it was just 3 weeks ago that the MMA media were trying to tell us that we had to put our support behind nail varnish, LGBTQ.ie, bending the knee to Black Lives Matter and anime. And all of a sudden, after a 5-round walloping, order seems to have been restored. There seems to be balance within the force once again, and that's coming in the form of Colby Covington, Bryce Mitchell and Sean Strickland, and I absolutely love it. Let me know your thoughts down below. Maybe hit like, subscribe, share, all that stuff. I appreciate you. Cheers.